Good evening, whoever is out there, whether it be ladies and gentlemen, or beings that have no relation to anything that we understand. If I'm speaking to the ether, very well, and so be it. I know I did not schedule this one. I can already hear a certain person coming into the stream right now complaining that this is another random stream. Since I'm going to attempt to make this about spirituality, I will not say the snarky thing that comes to mind. The weekend has been, frankly, quite a lot of time recently has been a struggle, and I don't want to go too deeply into that, but yes, of course, now my dog picks the time to bark. Why would she not? Come here, baby. Come here, baby. It's okay. She never barks. She almost literally never barks. She picks now. Well, at any rate, she is letting me know that there are squirrels or perhaps a crazy neighbor, all of which I shall ignore. One of the stated purposes of this channel is basically to try to figure out what's going on in the world. Come here, baby. Yes, you got him. Come here. Since I can't figure out what's going on in the world, I come to this place and try to do my thinking out loud and ping pong ideas off of some very intelligent people and see if I can figure out the world, and maybe we can help each other all do the same. Hail, Connie Cleary. It is so good to see you. Thank you for showing up. I don't intend to be too long. I definitely want to stop before the time of deleted scenes next stream. What I'm going to do today, what I want to do on Sundays when I have the time, I want to have something I'm going to call God Talk, which is a little bit more grandiose than likely it will be. But I want to basically get down to the basics. We whine and complain about the right and the left. We complain about people being crazy and the world being insane and nobody having morality. Well, likely I'm overthinking things, but oh yes, Connie Cleary, thank you very much. Don't even stress about it. I just was curious what you would think. I felt that when I made it that I'd done a pretty good job, and I got a decent number of views for my channel. Having said that, I listened to it again later, and it may not be as good as I thought it was. And God bless you, Mikey Susie 4. I know you are a God-fearing man, so hopefully my talk here will at least be vaguely worth your time. I don't claim to be any brilliant theologian. I don't claim to be any kind of a very godly person, but I will promise that at least in my youth, I did put a lot of serious thought and prayer into trying to figure out what I believe, what I think, all these things. One of the reasons why I want to do this episode, I basically want the community to more or less know, maybe not necessarily where I stand now, but the thoughts, the things that form my thinking up to now. Oh yeah, thank you, Connie Cleary. Yeah, just let me know what you think. And if you can't stand it after 20 minutes, that's fine too. One of the other people I sent it to said that they were liking it, and then all of a sudden some people in the chat went off the rails. I will respond to the chat as I always do, but I will also make this caveat that if people want to debate the Bible, I'm not here to do that. I'm not going to claim that I know more than you. I know that I've put effort into it. I think I know more than the average bear about it, but there are scholars that know profoundly more than I do. And I will defer, at least in some cases, to them. Yeah, no, you're not wrong. Signs have been showing every single day. If you believe those things, and I don't want to, I have friends who, I don't know that they're atheists per se, but they have lots of questions. They're not a orthodox Christian, which I don't say that to condemn them or to say that they're going to hell. That's not my job to say. I know that there will be people who will say, well, if you don't believe in Christ, you're going to hell. And that's, I'm not going to argue with that. But I'm not going, that's not my purpose on this channel. My purpose on this channel is to figure all that stuff out. Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, it's good to be with family, Connie. I'm certainly missing my family right now, but that is what it is. We live our lives and we make our choices, and time goes on. I don't know if I can claim this anymore, but I know that Curtis, up until the age, well, actually well past the age of 20, was mostly and primarily influenced by the Bible. Now, the trouble with that, I mean, there's no trouble necessarily with that, but one of the things with that, yes, Connie, my beliefs are not a Catholic nature either. Now, I have had some Catholic influences in my life, but I was actually until I was about 20, I was very fearful of the Catholic Church. I thought some pretty negative things about the Catholic Church. I still have some negative thoughts about certain people in the Catholic Church, but that was when I was young. Yeah, hey, Connie, that's actually cool, because one of my strongest followers on my blog is a Norse pagan, and I didn't intend to be disingenuous, but I talked with him so positively that I about had him half convinced that I also was a pagan, and I'm frankly not, but I have learned to have respect. And again, I'm not here to tell anyone what to think or what to believe, but I do have a lot of respect for people who have put deep thought into a pagan Norse Celtic belief system. I know people that I have friends, lots of friends, that will say you have to be Christian or you're going to hell. I'm not going to argue that. I'm not going to argue for or against that. I'm not here for that. I'm trying to figure out my own thoughts, my own beliefs, but I respect not people that just run around like with goofy helmets on and, oh man, let's ride bikes and raid towns. I'm not talking about that. I mean people who've really put thought into it, have read at least some of the old works, who believe in a spiritual world and try to honor it and practice it. Catholic holidays have quite a few pagan and Norse predecessors in them. Mikey Susie 4 is married to Suzanne. She's a universal life minister. We're both Christians. The Bible plainly says, judge not, lest ye. Yeah, exactly. And again, I will have friends who will listen to this and be like, dude, yeah, but the Bible says this. And I'm not, again, I know the Bible says this and that, but I am not God. I'm not the writer of the Bible. I'm not a prophet. I'm not a judge. I'm not here to tell you anything except for these are the things that influence my thought. These are some of the things that I think. what the hell? Am I right? Am I wrong? What do you guys think? It's not saying that I'm going to change my beliefs based off of what people say in the chat, but I am at least open to new thoughts, new ideas. And 100%, Connie. One of the things that one of the reasons why I'm doing this is I felt like there was debate that sometimes got close to being disrespectful. And I don't want to hammer anybody that was in that debate at all or call any of them out. I get that they were passionate Christians, both very intelligent, both with what they believed and what may have been good points. But I don't want to get into debate really about anything on here. I'm just sharing where I've come from, where I've gotten my beliefs, and where some of them have remained and some of them have eroded over time. Connie Cleary has to register herself as a minister. That's cool. You can marry your cousin's kid in their hand fasting ceremony. That's beautiful. I joke about it, and it is true, but it's more joke than anything. I did one day, just on a lark, get myself ordained in the Church of Dudism. It's valid in California. I don't know if it's valid anywhere else. While I'm not meaning to make light of religion at all, sometimes I get into a weird, dark mood and get a little, shall we say, a little angsty about things. Mikey CZ4, the end days will affect everyone, regardless of sex, religion, gender, belief systems, for anyone are essential. Yeah. Oh, cool. Universal Ministry Online. That's that's your next one is Dudism. That's fantastic. Okay. So I won't dive too deeply into the Bible. If you've read it, then you've read it. If you haven't, you haven't. It is still probably the thing in the book and the philosophy that the religion that most influences me and what I do and what I think. I won't say how much I've read it because I've read it just enough that saying the number sounds like I'm bragging, but not so much as to actually be impressive. So I will just say this: if you've read the Bible twice, maybe don't try to debate me. If you've read it 20 times and you have a master's in theology and you have absorbed the knowledge of great sages, I'm not in your league. I need to defer to you. So while it's probably not fair, I'm going to just kind of pass over the Bible and just suffice it to say, I believe in God, although I'm not 100% sure what that necessarily means. I believe that Jesus was the Son of God, but again, I don't know that we necessarily know what that means. I think that Jesus was a real person. I think he had some kind of profound connection with God, but I often wonder if we, and I would suggest maybe even the Bible, has gotten some of those aspects wrong. I realize that can be a dangerous philosophy. And by and large, if the Bible says something and I disagree with it, all things being equal, I'll defer to the Bible. Having said that, the example that I will give is the days of creation. I have so many, well, I have fewer and fewer of these friends as I get older, but I have so many friends that insist that the 7 days of creation were literal days. And I used to be caught, I was very much a fundamentalist. It's one of the reasons why I put the Bible first here, because for a long time, for probably 20 or maybe even 30 years, I was a fundamentalist. And I don't want to crap on fundamentalists, but I'm no longer one myself. I believe now that when the Bible talks about those days, that is simply a reference to a period of time. we don't necessarily know the length of that time. Mikey Susie 4. I've only read the Bible cover to cover 4 times in my lifetime, so I'm definitely not an expert, but my emotional beliefs are a strength at most times, and I'll respect that. I'll respect that. Yeah, Putin's cat, I do. And I'm going to tell you right up front, I'm not here to debate. I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'm sharing what has influenced me in the past, what has built up my building blocks of thought. And that way you have a better idea. Maybe you don't even want to be here and listen to my weird stuff. I will suggest this. If there aren't at least 4 things that I mention that you can't respect or can't believe in, then I'm not the person for you. The Bible, while I'm not a fundamentalist, is still very much at the core of what I think and believe. And you will have to make what you will of that statement. Yes. Thank you very much, Enigma Severus. I'm glad that you showed up, and it's cool whether you stay or go. Okay. The second thing, not nearly as profound, but more important likely than it deserves to be, is the old science fiction stuff of my childhood, namely the old Star Wars and the old Star Trek. Now, a lot of this has really, and thank you very much. And again, I'm actually okay with people making statements and talking. I don't want, I'm not doing this for debate. I'm not doing this to be controversial. I'm doing this to kind of let the community know this is who I am. This is why I believe the way I do. I may be completely screwed up, but these are the things that influence my thinking. And then, hopefully I'll learn as time goes on whether I'm full of crap or not. But Star Trek, especially, and a little bit Star Wars, were very influential on me as a young person. And I appreciate everybody in here. I really do. I know I got a little bit snippy, but I do appreciate everybody in here. It is one of the reasons why I'm doing this post, is so that people can kind of decide, is this person someone I really want to listen to, or is he just full of crap, or any of that? And I respect anyone that decides I'm full of crap. When I was young, probably all the way up until I was 17, 18, I wanted to be Spock. Now, my youthful mind did not get, but there is a pretty good contradiction between the Bible and Star Trek. I'm not saying they're diametrically opposed. I'm not saying that you can't love them both. But I wanted to be Spock. Unfortunately, I didn't really get, and I probably still don't thoroughly understand what logic was really all about. But having said that, that's what I wanted. I was a screwed up young kid. I was abused, and I felt like if I could shut off my emotions and I could be like Spock, and if everything I did was just based off of reason and logic and emotions be damned, then everything would turn out okay. Likely everyone in this chat understands that that was a big steaming pile, but that's where I was for about 17 or 18 years of my life. And it is okay to disagree, and agree to disagree always works fine with me, and me too. Respect is the big deal to me. If anything I say just sounds like lunacy, well, maybe it is. One of the things that I learned as I got older was that logic is a powerful tool. It's a powerful way of framing your thoughts, but it is not motivating. Logic, I won't say never, but it will rarely tell you this is what you should do. You have to have that emotion to say, hey, this is the thing that I'm aiming for. Now let's use the logic to aim for it. But as a child, I did not understand that. And the times between the philosophy of the times, which was a weird mix. I don't know who else remembers the 70s, but it was this weird mix of let's just let all of our emotions roll out and let's disco dance and let's party, with this other side of we will be completely controlled by our minds. We will be controlled by science and logic and emotions. Be a damned. Well, obviously, both of those are not healthy things. I don't reference this to ask for pity, but I reference this to remind you, logic is a great tool for an abused kid. He's not supposed to feel anyway. He's likely going to be beaten or neglected for feeling anything anyway. Logic gives this kid this feeling of superiority, and I don't demonstrate it much now, but I really was a pretty intelligent kid. I lost several points of intelligence when I got sick, and I don't think I'll ever get it back. But I was that really brilliant kid who could remember most things and could sometimes come up with the solutions to things. Dad used to get drunk in bars and say, son, say something smart. And I always had mixed emotions about that. Part of me loved it, and part of me wanted to smack him on the mouth. So, more than you need or want to know. But this weird kid that had this bizarre mix of a love of the Bible and also kind of a fear and vast misunderstanding of it, because I didn't really, I'd had a lot of Bible studies read to me, but I didn't actually read the Bible myself until I was probably 15 or 16, somewhere in there. Yes, there are a number of decisions Christ asks a human to make which are against logic. Yes, that is true. In some aspects, Christ does ask us to simply depend on faith and not always full logic. And that's, I do at least mostly agree that that is so. I know I sound equivocal a lot. The reason I equivocate, well, you're going to learn some of it now. An abused kid cannot afford to take many absolutes. One. Number two, even though the Bible is often interpreted as this big absolute thing, and in many cases is, there's also, I don't want to say gray area, because I think that's been overused and abused. But sometimes we just don't freaking get what God is doing, and we have to accept that. The next thing that came to influence me, and this also has fallen more than my love of Star Trek and Star Wars, but less than the Bible, because the Bible sadly is not as strongly influential to me as it used to be, but it's still very close to the most influential thing. But when I was about 5 or 6 years old, I was starting to follow politics. Dad was very much upset. I don't remember all the reasons why, but he was very much upset with Ford. He loved Carter and then decided he hated him later. But at the time, back in 75, 76, he loved Carter. He voted for him. And he did something that he didn't realize it, but it really colored the rest of my life. He watched the Republican National Convention. I want to say it was in 1976. And I heard the first political speech in my life, and it has never really completely left me. Now, again, I have learned as a grown up that Reagan had his flaws. He definitely did some things that were like, what in the hell was that? If I allow myself, I will get emotional and be very upset with him about the Iran-Contra thing and about the closing of all the banks. Not all the banks, but many of the rural banks in Oklahoma and Texas. This is never talked about. I wouldn't even know it, but it helped bankrupt my family. But in spite of all that, I've always loved him. I still love him, right or wrong. And this speech just always echoed with me. I don't know if I want to play the whole thing, but I'll play some snippets of it. And you don't necessarily, again, have to believe any of this, agree with any of this, but just imagine being this messed up kid that I've just described in these messed up times that were going on that he didn't understand. You know, I didn't understand anything about Nixon. I didn't understand anything about Ford or Carter. But this guy comes up and he says these things. I'll skip it.
We are all a part of this great Republican family that will give the leadership to the American people to win on November 2nd. I would be honored on your behalf to ask my good friend, Governor Reagan, to say a few words at this time.
And you got to remember, I'm 5 years old. I don't really understand what this is all about, but there's all this chaos and mayhem and everything like that. Yeah, I would tend to agree with that, Boots Cat. I actually love Carter now as a grown-up, as a man. President, maybe not so much.
Thank you very much. Mr. President, Mrs. Ford, Mr. Vice President, Mr. Vice President to be. The distinguished guest here, and you, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to say fellow Republicans here, but to those who are watching from a distance, all those millions of Democrats and independents who I know are looking for a cause around which to rally and which I believe we can give them.
And again, I'm trying not to oversell Reagan here. Even now, after all this time, I feel myself tingling at his words. I know that's stupid, but I feel the connection to him. But I want to point out the difference between the things he's saying and the things that we hear now. You know, he's speaking respectfully about the Democrats. He's speaking respectfully about the independents. He's not calling them stupid. He's not calling them dangerous. He's not throwing out a bunch of hyperbole. Now, there are examples where he does. You know, if you look, you will find it. Yeah, many presidents up until Clinton did have some military background. Yeah, that's true. Reagan, I don't believe, served in the military, but he was very involved with making some of the films to help with the war effort, which, and Reagan was a Democrat for a while. Later I listened to his speech on A Time for Choosing, and that was also very influential on my thinking, but mainly I just want to share this speech here. A Time for Choosing is much more about the logical thought, the things that at least arguably were facts that helped develop his thinking. He felt that the Democrat Party had left him, not him leaving it. And I sometimes feel that way about the Republican Party. it left me. I didn't leave it. Possibly I'm full of crap, but
Mr. President, before you arrived tonight, these wonderful people here, when we came in, gave Nancy and myself a welcome. That, plus this, and plus your kindness and generosity in honoring us by bringing us down here, will give us a memory that will live in our hearts forever. And I have seen you.
I'll skip the applauses. I will interject one thing, though. I later watched a documentary about this convention. And by the end of this speech, quite a few people were like, oh, crap. Because the whole point here is Reagan is conceding to Ford because Reagan had run for president, but he lost to Ford. And a lot of people were thinking after he gave this speech, we picked the wrong delegate. Yeah, that's right. Reagan was not in active duty because of his eyesight.
Also, with the warmth that you greeted Nancy, and you also filled my heart with joy when you did that. May I just say some words? There are cynics who say that a party platform is something that no one bothers to read and it doesn't very often amount to much. Whether it is different this time than it has ever been before, I believe the Republican Party has a platform that is a banner of bold, unmistakable colors with no pale. We have just heard a call to arms based on that platform, and a call to us to really be successful in communicating and reveal to the American people the difference between this platform and the platform of the opposing party, which is nothing but a revamp and a reissue and a running of a late show of the thing that we've been hearing from them for the last 40 years.
Now, of course, young Curtis Selby had no clue what the platforms were. But what I loved, in spite of the fact that I have the flaw of being an equivocator, I have always loved people who, without being arrogant, could just come out and say, hey, this is what I believe to be right. This is what I believe to be wrong. And I really loved that as a child. Carter did serve in the Navy. That's one of the reasons why my dad voted for him. He was like, well, he's a veteran. He's a farmer. He should understand our things. I'll skip ahead just a little bit.
Letter for a time capsule that is going to be opened in Los Angeles.
Okay.
If I could.
This is where I think the speech starts to get good. He talks about, the Republicans are great. The Democrats are not so great. But again, he doesn't do it in a completely disrespectful way, or at least not as disrespectful as some of the ways we have had in recent years. And then he goes into the time capsule story. And I don't know how I can get this across to the audience, but this had a profound effect on me as a 5-year-old. I fell in love with the man, with the thing that he was sharing, and it totally colored my thinking. Even now, when I'm thinking about politics or philosophy or life, I've got this story most of the time in the back of my head.
Just take a moment. I had an assignment the other day. Someone asked me to write a letter for a time capsule that is going to be opened in Los Angeles 100 years from now on our tricentennial. It sounded like an easy assignment. They suggested I write something about the problems and issues of the day, and I set out to do so, riding down the coast in an automobile, looking at the blue Pacific out on one side and the Santa Ynez Mountains on the other, and I couldn't help but wonder if it was going to be that beautiful 100 years from now as it was on that summer day. And then, as I tried to write, let your own minds turn to that task. You're going to write for people 100 years from now who know all about us. We know nothing about them. We don't know what kind of a world they'll be living in. And suddenly, I thought to myself, if I write of the problems, they'll be the domestic problems of which the President spoke here tonight, the challenges confronting us, the erosion of freedom that has taken place under Democrat rule in this country.
And to be fair, I do think that there's been some erosion from both parties. Reagan was the man. Hey, yeah, hello, Darth Plato. I am, while I'm not as much of a pro-Reagan person as I was, I am basically explaining to the community the things that were influential on my thought as a young man. I've been thinking that on Sundays, when I have the spare time, I will basically just share some thoughts about spirituality and about philosophy and about just the things that I'm trying to figure out. And for this introductory episode, I'm just simply sharing the things that influenced me when I was very young. Don't always necessarily have the same influences now as I did then, but Reagan was very, very pivotal and very influential on my developing thought. Lyndon Johnson was part of the Naval Reserve when Japan attacked. He requested an indefinite leave of absence, applied for active duty, making him one of the first members of Congress to volunteer for an active military role. Interesting. And Darth Plato, the 76th convention was controversial. Yeah, the party accused Reagan of trying to embarrass the party and Ford. Yeah, something that I didn't know as a 5-year-old, but yeah, it's true. JFK had his story in the Pacific. Reagan was very funny. He was a very good communicator. And Eisenhower, yeah, he was one of the great generals of all time, really. I mean, hell.
The invasion of private rights, the controls and restrictions on the vitality of the great free economy that we enjoy. These are our challenges that we must meet. And then again, there is that challenge of which he spoke, that we live in a world in which the great powers have poised and aimed at each other horrible missiles of destruction, nuclear weapons that can in a matter of minutes arrive in each other's country and destroy virtually the civilized world we live in.
And again, 5-year-old me knew nothing about this. I'd seen some lame sci-fi stuff, but I didn't really understand it. This was where I was learning that, oh my gosh, we live in a world that's on the brink of destruction all the time. Truman served during World War I as a field artillery officer, and he continued in the organized reserve corps until he retired in 1953. I read his biography by McCullough. It was an amazing book.
Suddenly it dawned on me, those who would read this letter 100 years from now will know whether those missiles were fired. They will know whether we met our challenge, whether they have the freedoms that we have known up until now will depend on what we do here. Will they look back with appreciation and say, thank God for those people in 1976 who headed off that loss of freedom, who kept us now 100 years later free, who kept our world from nuclear destruction? And if we failed, they probably won't get to read the letter at all because it spoke of individual freedom, and they won't be allowed to talk of that or read of it. This is our challenge. And this is why here in this hall tonight, better than we've ever done before, we've got to quit talking to each other and about each other and go out and communicate to the world that we may be fewer in numbers than we've ever been, but we carry the message they're waiting for. We must go forth from here united, determined that what a great general said a few years ago is true. There is no substitute for victory. Mr. President.
Anyway, that is the great Reagan speech that still probably colors a great deal of my political thought anyway. This was the point where liberty became very important to me. This is the point where I got my bias toward the Republican Party. It hasn't completely evaporated even now, although it's very tattered and frayed. And I always want to have that spirit of Reagan, of, the Democrat. I hope we can still say this, that the Democrat is not our enemy. It's just we have to be better at explaining the vision. We have to be better at explaining what the greatness of this country really was. And yes, FDR was the assistant naval secretary, but not allowed to serve an active duty. I believe that was because of his polio, or the things that had happened to him there. That was tragic. The next thing that influenced me were the works of C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien, specifically their fantasy. I have here an image of the Silmarillion. If I were to be a pagan, I would probably adopt some of the gods and beings that Tolkien talked about in here, even though they're fictional. I fell in love with this book right off the bat. The books of Lewis and Tolkien basically gave to me the template of what I still believe a good man and a good woman really are. I loved his metaphor of the gods at the beginning of time. It's actually what I'm using as my avatar picture right now. And he didn't have polio yet. He was only 31. I got you. But basically, God created the angels, the gods, whatever you want to call them, and they all sang before him at the beginning of time. And it's awfully tempting to actually read it to you. It's so beautifully written. It's written to be read aloud. I may do that someday if I just can think of a way not to get hit by the copyright. But it's a incredible story of everything was created by God, and all of the God's angels were created to be good and to be creators themselves in his myth. I know some people disagree with that thought, but in the Tolkien myth, they were. And then the devil, basically, who in his mythology he calls Morgoth, decides that he wants to sing an entirely different song, and all it becomes is a big discord. And it's ugly, and it's horrible, and it's brutal. And God actually not only is he not overcome by the singing of this dark song, he actually weaves it into a more beautiful and more essential and more powerful song, even in spite of everything Morgoth tries to do. And so the entire mythology of that world is exemplified by the metaphor of the gods, who are or the angels, however you want to look at it, singing either the song that God gave to them to the best of their ability, or defiantly trying to make up a discordant melody that has nothing to do with anything that God wants. To me, it's a very powerful metaphor, and it is still quite close to the core of my being. I would say it's closer now to the core of my being than anything I've brought up except for the Bible itself. That still has more influence on me than the Silmarillion did, but the works of Lewis, the fantasy works of Lewis and Tolkien, are just very profound to me. None of the presidents between Theodore Roosevelt and Truman apparently served. And Darth Plato, Morgoth was a modern artist. You know, at the risk of revealing my redneck childish prejudices, when I was a child, I am still neurodivergent, but it was more apparent when I was a child. I had this intensely sensitive hearing. Now, I've outgrown this, but when I was a child, I could not stand heavy metal music or rap music. It just was horrible to me. That was the sensitivity. I don't want to be unfair to those genres of music. I've since learned to really love a lot of heavy metal and some rap. But when I read this book, when I thought of the Discord of Melkor, which was the name of the devil before he fell, just like in our stories, you know, it was Lucifer and then he fell and became the devil. Melkor was the unfallen devil of this world. And the song that he sang when he tried to make it his own, make it different than God's, was called the Discord of Melkor. And that was always my metaphor for that. Now I realize that that's unfair. But 10, 12, 14-year-old me, that's what I considered a lot of modern music, was the Discord of Melkor. Some of my thoughts have changed. I'm just sharing what influenced me at the time and what in a lot of ways still does. Darth Plato does not listen to them. I'm getting a message. I'll listen to that when I'm done. I don't have a lot more to share here. I basically got 3 more things to share, and then I'll call it a stream. The works I'm about to share are further works of C.S. Lewis, but I separate them because the works, his fantasy works, had more of a visceral, emotional, artistic appeal to me. These works started to have more of an intellectual, spiritual impact on me. The first book outside of the Bible and that had a real spiritual impact on me was the Screwtape Letters. For those that don't know, the idea is that there is a devil who is writing letters to his nephew to help seduce and destroy a Christian. They are very dark, but they're also very fun. I won't play the whole thing, but I thought I would share maybe just the first minute or two so you could get some idea of the flavor of the Screwtape Letters. Love this channel, the C.S. Lewis Doodle. It's fantastic.
Ah, my dear Wormwood.
Uncle Screwtape, it was kind of you to come.
Kind? Don't be absurd.
Not kind.
If by my advice you succeed with your patient, then I'll have benefited our father's work and avoided his usual punishment and tortures. If you fail, then I will relish in applying those punishments and tortures to you. Where's your patient?
Inside.
The pub. Isn't that a rather boring and conventional attack?
Come and see.
I'm sorry, chaps, but I don't know how far science can go before it turns back on itself, reversing the goodness it purports to create.
Well, what do you mean, Hamilton? How far is too far? I saw in the newspapers this morning that a group of scientists, in Vienna, I think, have invented a means to splice the glands of young apes into old men, which renews their generative powers. Truly.
Anyway, I won't make you go through the whole thing, but the essence is he's having a little bit of fun with himself, largely. He's demonstrating. There's so much that he's demonstrating in there. But one of the biggest things that I got out of the Screw Tape letters was, this is going to sound weird, but I never actually thought, I always had been taught before that God was this big angry thing not really up in the sky, but out there, who said that he loved me, but really essentially hated me and wanted nothing but to make sure that I didn't enjoy anything, that, I was supposed to love everything, but that love was supposed to be this empty, soulless, darkly logical thing. The only thing that kind of saved me from that was the other works of Lewis and Tolkien. And from Lewis's perspective, this was not God. This was actually the devil. It was the devil that wanted people not to love and not to enjoy. I love that he has Screw Tape say that, as much use as we have used of it, sex is not something that was created by our Father below, though we have convinced the mortals that it is. No, we have not invented a single pleasure. It is all his realm. And that really, this probably sounds very mundane to you guys. To me, this was revolutionary. Pleasures were not the realm of the devil. They were the realm of God. And again, I'm not, you don't have to believe this. I'm not trying to convince you. This is my own thinking, colored by C.S. Lewis. But at this time, and, at the time when I was 20, and I still want to believe this, God is the one who actually creates love and creates beauty and creates everything that's wonderful. And the devil is the one that's out there trying to screw all that up. He's the one that's trying to make sure that, that God created sex and it's supposed to be this wonderful thing between you and this woman. Well, the devil's out there trying, and I know that's controversial now to say, but the devil's out there basically wanting to make sure that you two never really connect and you two really don't make each other happy and you two just hate each other and make each other miserable. It strongly colored my thought to this day. I guess I will share one more thing because I want to get off of here in just a few more minutes. The next book that influenced me was yet another C.S. Lewis book. I may go through this whole video, but it's only a few minutes. And this book is The Abolition of Man. Essentially, again, I know Enigma Severus talks about this quite a lot. We live in a time that talks a lot about moral relativism. And I want to be a little bit careful about this because I know I've just said, and I mean it, that I have respect for people who have different beliefs and different faiths. Having said that, while I'm not so sure we're smart enough to know what it is, I do think there is such a thing as an objective truth. And I don't know what other people's experiences were in college, but nearly everything I was taught was essentially an assault on that belief. Everything was relative. Everything was basically depending on what a society said. And this was brutal to me because, again, I was an overly sensitive young man. Putin's cat, there are many pleasures. We were supposed to refrain from some of them. Yeah. This is what God has commanded. The devil attempts to influence us to sin. So I was trying to wrestle with this whole, why is the university trying to tell me that everything is relative, but I, as this neurodivergent person and this person that believes in the Bible and Star Trek and Reagan and Lewis and Tolkien, I think there are some absolutes. The book that to this day has been the best for myself anyway, as far as explaining the truth that there is some kind of an objective reality, though we may not understand it, has been the abolition of man. And I just realized I am not actually sharing the video. So you're probably hearing it, but not seeing it.
He ought to be remembered for. That's what people in England wanted to hear on the radio while the Blitz was going on outside. Lewis was a classicist, which means he agreed with Plato and Aristotle a lot and considered himself a converted pagan in a world of apostate Christians. He had a way of introducing paradigm shifts that turned modern thought completely around. Rather than vainly trying to hit unbelievers over the head with the authority of Scripture, as so many would-be Christian apologists have unfortunately tried to do, Lewis defended his ideas through force of argument and tried to get people to examine and challenge their own philosophical presuppositions. The fundamentals of his philosophy are outlined in The Abolition of Man. The thesis of this book is that if we debunk and abolish traditional moral values and gain control over the conscience of man, as science has enabled us to control other things in nature, it will result in the eventual abolition of man, the dehumanization of humanity.
A little bit of a simplistic take on that, but it is essentially the truth of the book. He, a little bit like me, felt that we had been so influenced by I still want to say, I still believe that science is a good thing. Don't get me wrong. But sometimes I feel like people put too much reliance on science. Sometimes people think that they can rely on science for their moral authority. And at least anymore, respectfully, I beg to differ with that. Now, you can do some scientific studies about morality, but I don't think we can ever use science to actually get at what morality is. I think it's there in the old spiritual and philosophical traditions. And yeah, it means we have to work and we have to read and pray and think and talk and debate. But I think a large portion of it is there. And the science should only be, like logic, a tool for helping us to get to where we want to be, which even now I believe is a union with God, whatever God may be. Brings up a good point too. Putin's cat, because the people that hate gays, are they also without sin? No, I would suggest that they are not. I don't like to talk about being gay as being a sin anymore, partly because it's frankly dangerous to do so, but also even if we want to accept that it's a sin, and I'm leaving that up to everyone in the audience. I'm not declaring that. I've changed some of my views about that, and I know that's probably controversial. I may get into that another day. But I think if I understand Christ, and maybe I don't, likely I don't, he would say that the greater sin is the person who hates the gay. So, I mean, that's just me, though. Again, I'm not here to convince anybody of anything or to teach. I know I'm probably talking like a teacher, but that's not my meaning. I'm just simply trying to share the things that were formative to my thought. Partly to help the community understand who I am, and partly to, again, try to get my own thinking in a little better vein. And lastly of all, hopefully some of you find it either entertaining or informative. I know I kind of did a shallow run on this, but I think I'm going to call it a stream because I want to give people time to get over to deleted scenes and see his stream that's coming up. In the U.S., legislating against such behavior would allow legislation against adultery and other things that are mainly religious concerns. And yeah, it's a good point. I'm definitely not going to argue that you're wrong. I'm definitely not. A lot of these things are concerning to me. I know, what the Bible says about certain things, and I don't want to argue with it. I think that would be presumption. But at the same time, Lewis is, again, one of my masters, one of my spiritual masters. And I know that it's not in The Abolition of Man or in the Screwtape Letters, but in one of his other works, he talks about how a theocracy is the worst form of government. Because, granted, if we were unfallen, we probably wouldn't need a government. I don't know. I could be wrong, but I think unfallen man wouldn't need a government to tell it what to do. But number two, even if we did, being unfallen, I think that we would naturally know what God or the gods or whatever is out there wants of us, and we would just follow it and be obedient to the good that's out there. But we are, in some ways, we're not perfect. We are rebellious in a lot of ways, and there's good things about rebellion. I mean, the United States was founded on rebellion. Putin's Cat, the Bible also says, an eye for an eye. The New Testament abolished much of this. Christ only asked us all to accept him and not to sin. All right. Well, I know this was kind of a shallow run, but these are the things that, when you're wanting to know what the heck does Curtis think, odds are pretty good that if you just either pick up a Bible or pick up a copy of something C.S. Lewis or Tolkien wrote, or watch one of the more profound episodes of Star Trek, you probably have a decent idea, not a perfect idea. And again, none of this is to convince you that you should think or believe or be influenced by any of these things. But I do think that some of these works do posit some questions and do present some images that we ought to at least contemplate and emulate some of the better angels of our nature, for lack of a better term. I don't know if I'll do this the next Sunday. It just kind of depends on how much time and energy and how much people are even interested in it. And also will depend a lot on whether or not some other things actually come about. But I know I posit a lot of questions. I examine a lot of things, and I just want there to be some kind of anchor, some kind of base to let people know that for good or ill, these are the things that I'm relying on, at least in part, to influence my evaluations and thoughts. And hopefully people share some of these things. Hopefully not all of them sound stupid or goofy or crazy. But again, I would suggest that if only one or two of these things sound like good things to you, I'm probably not someone you need to even listen to, because I won't speak to you. I won't be able to. Nothing that I say will bridge the gap. So, going to call it a stream. Get the groovy music going that lets everybody know that this was the Tired Midnight Blogger. What blogs in this case at 6:32 p.m. trying to explain in a very fractured way the works, the books, the philosophies, the thoughts that were formative to my early youth and are still likely the majority of the things that I think. I would like to thank Connie Cleary, the loyal bird woman of YouTube, who is the most wonderful wrench. I don't have any idea. I think she exists in alternate universes. She's everywhere. Mikey Susie 4, God-fearing man. I love the reviews and the kind talks that he has with his friends. Putin's cat, as always, thank you very much for coming along and sharing some interesting thoughts that really did enhance the things that were being talked about. Enigma Severus, thank you very much for showing up. I hope if you get to watch this or did watch it, I hope at least it wasn't a complete ball of gobbledygook to you. I know you've studied Lewis and spirituality much more in depth than I have, but hopefully it's not at least a bunch of tripe to you. But if it is, I guess I can't help it too much at this point. And Darth Plato Reagan was the man, was funny. So thank you very much. And yes, Morgoth was a modern artist. I totally agree. Well, thank you all very much. Ancient Chinese secret. Yes, I would love to know. I still want to know your secret to being all over the place. But you know what? We all keep our secrets too. So I appreciate everyone here. I love everyone here. I know my Christianity is probably a big tattered pile of rags, whatever I may be, but whatever it is, I offer it to you with what love I have. So I appreciate everyone, and I hope you have a wonderful evening. Before I go, though, I do want to make sure that everyone at least has the opportunity. Dadgummit, okay. Everybody's doing stuff, and everybody's doing cool stuff. So I may leave 2 links when I'm done. Please feel free to either go to this one is deleted scenes. He's going to do his take, I believe, on the attempted assassination of Trump. I've already done mine. I suspect deleted scenes will have some very pertinent information as well. And then it looks like Moira Kitty is doing some stuff she's already on. She is talking about the news. So if you want to look at her discussion of the news, you can go here. And I don't know, I'll probably walk the dog or something and then get into one of those streams. Love y'all. Thank you very much. Whatever God or gods or whatever is out there, I hope you are all blessed. Yes, Connie, I can't either. All right, take care. Have a good one.